40 million years ago, the Earth burned. The last of the remnants knew that the planet was dead, as was the human race. At least, if nothing was done. Maybe we deserved it. We spent all of our time making bigger and better weapons to kill people we never met on the other side of the world. People who could not affect us at all, except for the fact that they had the same weapons we did and wanted to destroy us just as badly as we wanted to destroy them. There was only one inevitable outcome for humanity: to destroy ourselves in fire. The last remnants of Earth realized this, but despite this fact, they did not give up. They built ships to travel the stars. Maybe out there, the human race could continue on. So the remnants used what they had left to create ships to send to other worlds. Surely, if enough ships were sent, then some would survive. And at least one did. They named the planet Harmony and made a plan to never repeat the mistakes of Earth. To ensure this, they genetically manipulated themselves to be susceptible to the transmissions of an overseeing computer, the Oversoul, basically giving this benevolent AI a telepathic connection to the people of Harmony. So for 40 million years, the Oversoul allowed humanity only technology that would make them better, and nothing that would allow them to repeat the disaster of Earth. As a young teen, the Harmony Saga was exciting and different. At the time, I missed most of the implications of the book and just enjoyed it for its strange and unique setting. Rereading it as an adult, it almost feels like a completely different series. I knew nothing of politics as a teen. I had no idea what the word gerrymandering even meant, let alone had enough of a grasp on it to see it when it was presented. I just related to the main character as a boy living under a strong, commanding mother. Just like Naif, I had fingerprints on my cheek a few times. Don't get me wrong, unlike Naif, I probably deserved it. I remember thinking that the wilds outside the walls of Basilica sounded like a utopia free of rules. I couldn't understand why anyone would want to live in Basilica. As an adult, some of the themes I missed before now feel heavy-handed. Maybe because I spent too much time learning of politics and how the American government functions. Or doesn't. It's usually clear to me which side of the aisle an author is on. I just try to avoid that because I want this channel to be about interesting stories that take you away from reality, not rub your face in it, which is the whole reason I have always loved sci-fi. Card never makes his opinion clear, he just presents stories and lets you decide. I was always told that if you want to keep the conversation civil, don't talk politics or religion. Well, unfortunately, those are two of the main themes of this book. But don't worry, unless you have no sense of fairness, you should understand the problems that Card is putting forth very early on in this series. Card does a decent job of putting sci-fi to one of its best uses. Sci-fi can hold a mirror up to society without causing people to fall back on their preconceived ideas and their conditioning, forcing them to actually think through their beliefs instead of just priming them to spew out a line their friends, family, or role models have spat out 1,000 times before without any thought. So please don't get caught up in what your political side has told you. If you really read this book, you will see that both sides of the aisle are admonished in their own ways, whether intentionally or not. So don't read, or in this case hear, one line and think you know who Card is. As someone who has read all of his work, I still have no clue who Card is. He is one of the most unique writers I know of. Does that mean he's the best? Well, that's a subjective opinion, so I will leave that up to you to decide. I'm not making that claim. I'm just saying that Card touches on a lot of moral issues in his writing, but never offers a concrete opinion. Once again, he leaves that up to you. Now, let's get into the story. One of the cities on the planet Harmony is called Basilica, a city controlled entirely by women. But it is no utopia, for women and men do not differ as much as they like to pretend. Within the city walls, men were not much better than slaves. The women hoarded all the knowledge, property, wealth, and their religion. Men were not allowed to own property anywhere in the extended city, even in the districts outside the walls. They were not even allowed within the city walls unless they signed a marriage contract with a woman, were children under the age of 14, or were studying to be a scholar. Typically, at 14, the male children were exiled to outside the city walls, younger if the mother so chose, which they regularly did, abandoning their male children to the dangerous wilds of outside the city walls. Within the city walls, men had no say, and women had all the power, not even allowing men to look at the holy lake at the center of the city. The men were given no security, paid next to nothing for their toils, and allowed no property or power, which allowed the landowning women to price gouge the men who were forced to rent from them without consequences. And this is how we meet the Wetchik family. The father, just called the Wetchik, is a trader who makes his money in other, non-women-controlled cities. He lives with his 4 sons within the city limits, but outside the city walls. The eldest, Meb, doesn't seem to work. The second, Elia, is following in his father's footsteps as a trader. The third, Isib, is a cripple studying in the city to become a scholar. And the youngest son, Naif, was recently exiled outside the city walls at the age of 14, still trying to find his way, still attending classes with his older scholar brother in the city during the day, as he has not yet ruled out the possibility that he too may become a scholar. It is at one of these classes that the youngest, Naif, finds his father Wetchik waiting one day. His mother brings him and his crippled older brother into a private area on the portico, where his father, a good man, but one that has never shown any interest in religion, tells them of a vision he had while traveling through the desert on a trading mission. His vision is of the city burning, but as he tells the story, Naif notices that 2 strange girls are also in attendance. The younger of the 2 is thought to be a seer, Luette, one of the few people alive who could talk directly to the Oversoul, or so it was said. Naif doubted this, however, as he had met her once before, and she had made the insane claim that the woman of his dreams, his love since childhood, would offer him a marriage contract, and he would decline. Something that could not possibly be true. But here she was, critiquing his father's supposed vision. Father believed he saw the city on fire and needed to warn everyone. But with prodding from Luette, he realized that his vision was actually that the whole world would burn, and his warning was to tell people to return to the old ways. Luette says this is a true vision from the Oversoul, but Naif has had enough. His father was a respected man, but this 12-year-old Luette was talking to him like he was a child. The whole religion was just stories anyway. He did not believe any of them, so how could the fictional Oversoul say anything to anyone? He said as much. His mother, however, thinks very highly of herself, even making claims that she is better than even the other women of the city. And because of this, she holds her son to a higher standard than others. She chastises them for not knowing what no one had taught them, for not knowing what no woman had told any man, for not knowing the difference between the obvious fables she had told them and the fanciful stories which she now claimed were true. namely, that when the women of Basilica soaked in the waters of the forbidden holy lake at the center of the city, they received visions from the Oversoul. Naif had enough. He leaves the meeting disgusted by his own parents. He knows this may mean the end of his lessons in the city, but why should he care? His oldest brother Meb left the city at the age of 8 and never looked back. Now, he lived the freest life of anyone Naif knew. Why not be like him? Maybe he could be an artist or an actor. Maybe today, Naif would find out what his true calling was. He wandered through the city looking at people's works from different professions. For hours he wondered. He didn't have the skills to be a sculptor or painter. Maybe he could be a singer or actor. He wandered down to where the plays were practiced and began to watch a rehearsal. It was a lowbrow satire with beginner actors trying to find their way in the business still. The perfect spot for Naif. All satire actors wore masks to protect them from the people that they made fun of, preventing the self-proclaimed victims from taking revenge on them. But as he watched the play they were rehearsing, he realized something dreadful. The satirical play was about his father, and it was not flattering in any way. They were calling his vision a lie, and calling him a scam artist, attempting to increase his family's prestige by falsely proclaiming he spoke with the Oversoul. His family would be a joke for some time to come. How the satirist found out about his father's vision so fast was also concerning. Was father just blabbing his supposed vision to anyone that would listen? The family would not remain respected for long if this was the case. Not many people believed that the Oversoul, if it even existed, actually gave visions, and it never gave visions to men. As the satire confirmed for Naif, his father would be painted as a con man, trying to lie his way to more wealth and power. Then, Naif realized that this scene was taking place on the private portico, where it was only his mother, father, Isib, and the 2 girls besides himself. He must have been one of the girls who told this story to the satirist, or at least to someone who then told the satirist. Naif knew that Louette girl was a no-good liar. As Naif continued to watch the rehearsal, one of the actors got into a debate with the satirist who wrote the play, and in the process, he took his mask off. It was Naif's oldest brother, Meb. Well, that explained where Meb was getting his money from, at least. Naif couldn't help himself, and he confronted Meb. How could he play a leading role in a satire aiming to embarrass his own father? Meb, however, had had no way to know that this was about his father. He was not at the portico, and the satirist had not told him. Instantly, Meb knew what the satirist had planned. He was planning on unmasking Meb once the play was over to further embarrass the family. He confronted the satirist, who barely denied it, before basically admitting to it in not so many words. Now, Meb was out of a job, and even worse, his father had destroyed any respect his family once had. That evening, Meb and Father Wechik argued over his father claiming he had a vision. Naif and Elia, the second oldest son, argued over what to do about Father's vision, and the next day, Naif and his mother argued over him leaving class the day before. Meb believed that Father should stop spreading his vision around, drawing ridicule. Elia believed that Father claiming that the Oversoul wanted to go back to the old ways would destroy his and his cohort's plans. The Oversoul banned wheeled transports as blasphemy, yet Elia and his cohorts were conspiring with a nearby city, Pataku, to create war wagons and transport wagons. They would ally with Pataku and make them war wagons for their war against another city, the Gorani, in exchange for the plans for these wagons. As a trader, Elia wanted the wagons to make his trips more profitable, but if they went back to the old ways, the Pataku would not get their war wagons, and Elia would not get his transport wagons to help with his trading routes. And finally, Mother Rasa believed that Naif was just a male child, not worthy of anything but derision.
Where did you spend all day yesterday?
Nafai didn't want this conversation, but there was no avoiding it. Mother was not one to let one of her students disappear for a day without an accounting.
I walked around.
I didn't think that you flew. Though I'm surprised you didn't curl up somewhere and sleep. Where did you go?
There's some very educational places.
Dolltown?
There's nothing much going on there in the daytime, Mother.
And you shouldn't be going there at all. Or do you think you already know everything about everything, so that you have no further need of schooling?
There are some subjects you just don't teach here, Mother.
Ah, Dell was right about you.
Oh yes, wonderful. Time to get an auntie for your little boy.
I should have seen it coming. Your body is growing so fast. Too fast, I fear. Outstripping your maturity in every other area.
This was too much to bear. He had planned to listen calmly to everything she said, let her jump to her own conclusions, and then get back to class and have done with the whole thing. But to have her thinking that his gonads were running his life when, if anything, his mind was more mature than his body.
Is that as smart as you know how to be, Mother? You see something inexplicable going on, and if it's a boy doing it, you're sure it has to do with his sexual desires.
I do have some knowledge of men, Nafai. And the idea that the behavior of a 14-year-old might have some link to sexual desire is based on much evidence.
But I'm your son, and you still don't know me from a pile of bricks.
So you didn't go to Dolltown?
Not for any reason you'd imagine.
Ah, I can imagine many reasons, but not one of the possible reasons for you to go to Dolltown suggests that you have very good judgment.
Oh, and you're the expert on good judgment, I imagine?
You forget, I think, that I am your mother and your schoolmistress.
It was you, Mother, and not I, who invited those two girls to our family meeting yesterday.
And this showed poor judgment on my part?
Extremely poor. By the time I got to the open theater, it was still several hours before dark, and already the word was out about Father's vision.
That's not surprising. Father went directly to the clan council. It would hardly be a secret after that.
Not just his vision, Mother. There was already a satire in rehearsal, one of Drodek's too, no less, that included a fascinating little portico scene, since the only people present who were not family were those two witch girls.
Hold your tongue. You referring to them by that demeaning man word is offensive in the extreme. Luette is a seer, and Hashida is a raveler. Furthermore, both have been completely discreet, mentioning nothing to anyone.
Oh, have you been watching them every second since?
I said hold your tongue. For your information, my bright, wise, mature little boy, the reason there was a portico scene at Drodek's satire, which, by the way, I saw, and it was very badly done, so it hardly worries me. The reason there was a portico scene was because while your father was going to the clan council, I was at the city council, and when I told the story, I included the events on the portico. Why? Asks my brilliant son, with a deliciously stupid look on his face. Because the only thing that made the council take your father's vision seriously was the fact that Luette believed him and found his vision consonant with her own.
Mother had told. Mother had brought down ridicule and ruin upon the family. Unbelievable.
Ah.
I thought you'd see things a little differently.
I see that there was nothing wrong with having Luette and Hashida at the family meeting. It was you who should have been excluded.
Her hand lashed out across his face. If she had been aiming for his cheek, she missed. Perhaps because he reflexively drew his head back. Instead, her fingernail caught him on the chin, tearing the skin. It stung and drew blood.
You forget yourself, sir.
Not as badly as you have forgotten yourself, madam, he answered. Or rather, that was how he meant to answer. He even began to answer that way, but in the middle of the sentence, the enormity of her having struck him that way, the shock and hurt of it, the sheer humiliation of his mother hitting him reduced him to tears.
I'm sorry.
Though what he really wanted to say was, "How dare you? I'm too old for that. I hate you." It was impossible to say such harsh things, however, when he was crying like a baby. Nafai hated it. How tears had always come so easily to him, and it wasn't getting any better as he got older.
Maybe next time you'll remember to speak to me with the proper respect.
But she, too, was unable to maintain her sharp tone, for even as she spoke, he felt her arm around him as she sat beside him, comforted him. She could not possibly understand that the way she nestled his head to her shoulder only added to the humiliation and confirmed him in his decision to regard her as an enemy. If she had the power to make him cry because of his love for her, then there was only one possible solution for him: to cease loving her. This was the last time she would ever be able to do this to him.
You're bleeding.
It's nothing.
Let me staunch it. Here, with a clean handkerchief, not that horrible rag you carry in your pocket, you absurd little boy.
That's all I'll ever be in this house, isn't it? An absurd little boy. He pulled away from her, refused to let the handkerchief touch his chin, but she persisted and dabbed at the wound, and the white cloth came away surprisingly bloody. So he took it from her hand and pressed it against the wound.
Deep, I guess.
If you hadn't moved your head back, my nails wouldn't have caught your chin like that.
If you hadn't slapped me, your nails would have been in your lap. But he held his tongue. After Mother Rasa finished blaming the victim for making her hurt him, she left to attend her business. And Naif, left alone on the portico, did what no man was allowed to do. He passed the dividing screen and went to the balcony and looked out across the holy lake far below in the Rift Valley. He also saw the districts on the edge of the lake where no men were ever allowed. These tiny districts, with few residents, he knew, still had the same voting power as every other much larger district. These few women had gerrymandered the system so that they alone held almost half the power of the city, despite being a tiny minority. And they were very conservative, always voting against any change, against giving men the right to vote, against allowing men to live in their districts, against allowing districts outside the walls in the men's living areas to have any vote at all. It was thanks to these women that men could be fleeced by the female landowners in these voteless outside districts, and women could break any contract with a man and face no repercussions. It was thanks to these few women that Basilica ensured men were refused the protections of the city walls with their computer-protected gates and not allowed to own property in the city. Some of the other women disagreed with these laws, maybe even more than wanted to keep things the same. But individually, they held much less power in their larger districts. The system was inherently flawed and unequal, and that was by design. Those who hold power are never likely to give up even a scrap of that power willingly. After a moment, Naif left the balcony and went to find his brother in the library, as his mother had commanded. But Mother had no idea what Isib, the crippled brother, was really up to. When Naif arrived, Isib decided to use his younger brother as a test subject. He began to say words that Naif knew but did not know somehow. Car, airplane, spaceship. Suddenly, Naif started to feel sick. He felt an overwhelming urge to leave the library, and the next thing he knew, he was panting in the street, with Isib trying to calm him down. He asked Isib what had happened. Isib explained that for the last year, he had been researching forbidden words. He had found them by accident. He was compiling a list of old words that no longer had their original meanings. Words like bear, an animal that had gone extinct on Harmony millions of years ago. So long ago that despite using the word in colloquialisms such as, "You look like a dancing bear," no one had any clue what a bear was. In the process of making this list, he accidentally found words like war wagon and airplane, words for machines and tools that had existed when the planet was founded but had not been recreated any time in the last 40 million years for some reason. When he would come across one of these words, he wrote it down for later study, but when he tried to learn what they meant, he would forget what he was doing and start a different project. But he kept coming back to his list and seeing it just to remember what it was, and then forget again. After a few times of this, he realized something strange was happening, so he forced himself to learn what the words meant without getting distracted. He learned what they were referring to, and he began to realize that the Oversoul had forbidden these words. it would do whatever it could to keep people from thinking about them and what they implied. Motorized travel, real-time long-distance communications, and weapons of destruction. The Oversoul did not keep people from being people. Murders and robberies still happened. It just kept them from destroying entire civilizations. It kept them from the tools of advanced warfare and the reasons to engage in it. Even wheeled devices like wagons were forbidden, as a war wagon would allow for a city to become a local empire. The Oversoul did not stop thieves and killers, it just stopped potential tyrants from acquiring the tools to become actual tyrants. But at one time, Harmony did have planes and cars. They were there in the history records of the library computer. This meant that the Oversoul had been created, or at least implemented, after the people arrived on Harmony, to ensure that Harmony never burned like the Earth did. Isib believed that the first people had genetically modified their own descendants to be susceptible to signals from the Oversoul, and allowing it to read and even affect their minds, effectively making the Oversoul telepathic. After a week of Naif working with his older brother Isib on learning the forbidden words' meanings and resisting the Oversoul's attempts to distract them, they heard that none of the women that visited the lake had received a vision in the last week, the same amount of time that Naif and Isib had been working to resist the Oversoul. Could it be that they were taking up all of the Oversoul's time with their research and resistance? The Oversoul was clearly acting to keep them from these words, yet it was giving no vision to the women of the lake anymore. Naif and Isib discussed the situation and came to the conclusion that the Oversoul was decaying. It was running down after 40 million years, and they needed to let the Oversoul know that they were on its side, and it should stop wasting its efforts on them. First, they would start with a break from their research, but that would not be enough. They went to the only men's temple in the city and prayed, not by soaking themselves in relaxing water like the women, but with pain. Bloodletting. Isib, being a cripple, gave only the few drops of blood required of him to enter the temple, but Naif took the rings of pain and slapped his thighs, chest, and back, making the other worshippers murmur in approval for his display of devotion and bloodletting, and yet still he heard nothing from the Oversoul. When they returned to the house, they ran into their father, who told them that the leader of their clan and the leader of the pro-war wagon faction, Gabalufix, or Gabia for short, had asked him to set up a meeting between Father Wetchick, himself, and Robtat, the leader of the anti-war wagon faction. It seemed that the leader of the pro-war wagon faction, Gabia, wanted to ally with the city that had given them the plans for the war wagons, Potaku, and the other faction, led by Robtat, the anti-war wagon faction, wanted to ally with the enemy of the Potaku, the Gorani, while Father Wetchick and the rest of the city just wanted to stay neutral. So Gabalufix asked for the meeting to discuss the issue, but Father Wetchick did not trust him. He had known Gabia since he was a child. Gabia was, after all, the son of his previous wife, from her previous marriage, making Gabia half-brother to Elia, as they shared the same mother. But he was also a known schemer, and he lusted after power. That was how he became the leader of the clan at such a young age. But what could Father Wetchick do? He had no legitimate reason not to set up the meeting, and so he did. It was set for the next day at sunrise. That night, Naif went to sleep in pain from his blood offering, feeling like it was all for naught. The Oversoul still had not said anything to him. But in the middle of the night he awoke, and could not return to sleep. He had a strange urge to leave his home and go outside the gates. Was this urge coming from the Oversoul? He quietly went out of the house and through the gate, and then he noticed that the light was on in the hospitality house. A house with a door leading to the street where any wary traveler could spend the night and fill their stomach if they so desired. It was not uncommon for the house to be used, but Naif was drawn to it for some reason. He peered in the window and saw Louette, the 12-year-old seer girl. When Naif opened the door, she looked afraid, until she saw him. She told him that the Oversoul had given her a vision and then led her to the house. She did not know who owned it until she saw Naif. Her vision was of Naif's father being framed for killing a man and then being assassinated himself at a meeting. Immediately, Naif knew what this meant. The scheming Gabelufix would kill Robtat and Father while setting it up to look as if it were Father who killed Robtat, thereby removing all of Gabelufix's enemies in one night. Naif went back inside and woke his father from his own vision. He had dreamed that one of his sons would kill him. When Naif told his father of his meeting with Luette in her vision, Father decided immediately that the family must leave the city. If Gabia did not kill him today, surely he would try again. Not going to the meeting would not be enough. They must leave. And so they did. Meb, Elia, Isib, and Naif packed up all of Father and Elia's trading equipment on their camels, and the five left for the desert where no one would find them. By the time the Gabelufix found this out, it was too late to kill Robtat and blame it on Father Wechik. So instead, he spread rumors that Wechik tried to kill him and has fled the city after it failed, turning a large portion of the city against Father Wechik. The four boys and Father Wechik stayed in the desert for several days until once again Naif was awakened by the Oversoul. But this time the Oversoul did not give vague guidance or indirect visions. It spoke words to Naif and showed him what life was like before the Oversoul. It showed him weapons of war beyond his understanding. Not just mere war wagons, but self-powered wagons and tube-shaped houses that flew through the sky and dropped rocks that made explosions beyond belief. The next day, when Naif told his family about this, only Isib believed him. His vision was too clear. Visions were never that clear. It must be his imagination, Father said. He was making it up for attention, his brothers said. But the next night, Father also had another vision. He saw his four sons returning to Basilica to retrieve their clan's index. Father Wechik would not say what the index was. Most indices were just lists of family members, no more than a family tree. So what was so special about this one? Father would not say, but he did say that Gabia had it, the man who planned to kill him. So the four boys returned to Basilica, but Elia tricked the other three into staying outside the city walls, hidden. He had them draw lots to see which son would enter the city and try to get the index, but he had rigged the game so he would win. Once in the city, his resolve wavered, so he went to Lady Ross's house to see her daughter that he was courting. Here, he spoke with Lady Rossa, and she informed him that she did not know what the clan index was either, but she had heard it was important enough that Gabelufix would never part with it willingly. But Elia had no choice, so after cleaning the desert grime off himself at Rosa's house, he went to meet Gabelufix. Gabia played word games for a bit until Elia called him on them, at which point he admitted he was planning on killing Father and pinning it on Elia by planting Elia's pulse rifle at the scene. Elia felt like a fool. Gabia had tricked him, and there was nothing he could do about it. But the one ray of hope was that it seemed Gabia was willing to sell them the index for a large sum of money. He needed money to keep paying his soldiers that he had hired and sent out into the city to terrorize it, under the guise of protecting it. But there was a problem with this idea. Elia did not have access to Father's fortune. He did not have the passwords to his accounts. So Elia returned to his brothers outside the wall and told them what Gabia had said. At which point Isib now humiliated his older brothers by letting them know that Father had trusted him, and him alone, with the password in case of emergencies. If Father had died unexpectedly or was incapacitated, the fortune would be forever locked away from his children. But Father was no fool. He knew that Meb would squander the fortune on fancy clothing and women and gambling if given the chance. Elia was constantly disagreeing with Father on how to invest the fortune, and Naif was too young to need access to the fortune. But Isib was a scholar. He needed the password for accessing the restricted parts of the city library, and he was responsible enough to not squander the fortune. He was Father's only choice. Now, with access to the family fortune, the four sons decided that they would pull all of the family's funds out of the bank and use them to buy the index. But to do so, they would need the help of a high-ranking member of their clan for security. Someone Gabia could not just kill and steal their money from. So they found Rush Galavak, the executor of the Wetchik estate, and told him of their plan. Together, the five of them withdrew all the family fortune and went to see Gabia. Elia, the only one with trading experience, tried to make a deal with Gabia, offering 1/4 of the family fortune. When Gabia declined to accept it, Elia tried to bluff that he would walk out, and Naif panicked. He knew that they needed to get the index even if it cost them the full fortune, so to Elia's dismay, Naif offered it all. But Gabia, after his previous talk with Elia, had predicted this and made plans. He had already spoken with Rosh before the meeting and convinced him that the four sons were not capable of handling the family fortune. He told Rosh that they would soon prove this to him. And Naif's naive actions did exactly that in Rosh's mind, offering the entire fortune for an index that, according to Gabia, was of no consequence. So with Gabia's help, Rosh took control of the money offered to Gabia, or rather, decided to have Gabia take it for safekeeping, and they kicked the four brothers out to the streets, where Gabia's assassins waited. The four brothers knew they would be killed, so they decided their best plan of action was to split up. Elia got lucky and basically walked out of the city without trouble. Meb used his actor's chops and female friends to play the part of a woman, and within a group of actual women he knew, he fled the city. Isib, the cripple, used the benefits of his disability to fly away, something even he didn't know he could do, since he had never had reason to try to fly that high before. But Naif. The Oversoul led Naif to Luet, who in turn was guided by the Oversoul to the Lake of Women, a place where no man had ever set foot before. As they moved into the darkness at the end of Spring Street, the assassins became bolder. "That's right," one of them called out, softly, but audibly enough to Nafai and Luet. "Into the shadows. That's where we'll have our conversation."
"We have nothing for you to steal."
Luet's voice sounded panicked, trembling, but Nafai knew from her hand's steady grip that she was not trembling at all. Nafai was trembling, however. "Into the shadows," said the man again. So they obeyed him, plunged into the darkness under the trees. But to Nafai's surprise, they didn't stop, nor did they turn south to skirt the forest and perhaps re-enter the city at the next road. She led him almost straight east, deeper into the forbidden country.
I can't go here.
"Shut up. Neither can they, unless they hear us talking and follow the sound."
He held his tongue and followed her. After a while, the ground began to fall away, not a slope anymore, as much as a cliff, and it became very difficult to pick his way. The sky was fully dark now, and even though many leaves had fallen here, the shade of the trees was still quite deep.
I can't see.
"Neither can I."
Stop. Listen. Maybe they've stopped following us.
"They have, but we can't stop.
Why not?
I've got to take you out of the city."
If I'm caught here, the punishment is terrible.
"I know. As bad for me, though, for bringing you."
Then take me back.
"No, this is where the Oversoul wants us to go."
It was too hard, however, to hold hands anymore. They both needed both hands to make their way down the ragged face of the cliff. It wouldn't have been that dangerous a climb in daylight, but in the darkness, they might not see a drop-off that would kill them, so every step had to be tested. At least on this slope, the trees were rarer, so the starlight could do a little better job of helping them to see. At least, that's how it was until they reached the fog.
Now we have to stop.
Keep climbing.
In the fog, we'll get lost on the cliff face and fall and die.
It's a good sign. It means that we're at least halfway down to the lake.
You're not taking me to the lake.
Hush.
Why don't I just throw myself down the quick way then and save them the effort of killing me?
Hush, you stupid man. The Oversoul will protect us.
The Oversoul is a computer link with satellites orbiting Harmony. It doesn't have any magical machines to reach down and catch us if we fall.
She's making us alert, or she's helping me, at least, to find the way. If you'd only stop talking and let me listen to her.
They were hours climbing down through the fog, or so it seemed to Nafai, but at last they reached the bottom. Grass on a level plain, giving way to mud. Warm mud. No, hot mud.
Here we are. We can't go into the water here. It comes up from a rift deep in the crust of the world, where it's so hot that it boils and gives off steam. The water would cook the meat from our bones if we stayed in it for any length of time, even near the shore.
Then how do the women ever?
We do our worship nearer to the other end, where the lake is fed by ice-cold mountain streams. Some go into the coldest water, but the visions come to most of us when we float in the water at the place where the cold and hot waters meet. A turbulent place, the water endlessly rocking and swirling, freezing and searing us by turns. The place where the heart of the world and its coldest surface come together. A place where the two hearts of every woman are made one.
I don't belong here.
I know, but here is where the Oversoul led us, so here we'll stay.
And then what Nafai feared most, a woman speaking not far off.
I told you I heard a man's voice. It came from there.
Lanterns came near, and many women. Their feet made splattering noises with each step in the hot mud, then sucking noises as they pulled them out again. How far have I sunk into the mud, wondered Nafai. Will they have trouble pulling me out, or will they simply bury me alive right here, letting the mud decide whether to cook me or suffocate me?
I brought him.
It's Louette.
The name was picked up in a whisper and carried back through the gathering crowd.
The Oversoul led me here. This man isn't like other men. The Oversoul has chosen him.
The law is the law. You have taken the responsibility on yourself, but that only moves the punishment from him to you.
Nafai saw how tense Louette looked. He realized she doesn't understand the Oversoul any better than I do. For all she knows, the Oversoul doesn't care whether she lives or dies, and may be perfectly content to let her pay with her life for my safe passage here tonight.
Very well, but you must take him to the private gate and help him through the wood.
You can't tell us what we must do, lawbreaker,
cried one woman, but the others shushed her. Louette was held in great reverence, Nafai could see, even when she had committed an outrage. Then the crowd parted, just a little, to let a woman pass, appearing like a ghost from the fog. She was naked, and because she was clean, Nafai didn't realize for a moment that she must be a wilder. It was only when she came very close, plucking at Louette's sleeve, that Nafai could see how weathered and dry her skin was, how wrinkled and how gaunt her face.
You.
Then the holy woman from the desert turned to the old woman, who seemed to be the leader of this band of justicers.
I have already punished her.
What do you mean?
I am the Oversoul, and I say she has already borne my punishment.
The old woman looked at Louette, full of uncertainty.
Is this true speech, Louette?
Nafai was amazed. Was their trust in Louette so complete that they would ask her to confirm or deny testimony that might cost her life or save it, depending on her own answer? Their truth was justified, for Louette's answer contained no special pleading for herself.
This holy woman only slapped my face. How could it be punishment enough for this?
I brought her here. I made her bring this boy. I have shown him great visions, and I will show him more. I will put honor in his seed, and a great nation shall arise. Let no one hinder him in his path through the water and the wood. She has borne the mark of my hand upon her face. Who can touch her after I have done with her?
Truly, this is the voice of the mother.
The mother, whispered some. The oversoul, whispered others. The holy woman turned to face Louette again and reached up to touch one finger to the girl's lips. Louette kissed that finger, gently, and for a moment, Nafai ached for the sweetness of it. Then, the Wilder's expression changed. It was as if some brighter soul had been inside her face, and now it was gone. She looked distracted, vaguely confused. She looked around, recognizing nothing, and then wandered off into the fog.
Was that your mother?
No, the mother of my body isn't holy anymore, but in my heart, all such women are my mother.
Well spoken. What a fair-spoken child she is.
Louette bowed her head. When she lifted her face again, Nafai could see tears on her cheeks. He had no idea what was happening here, or what it meant to Louette. He only knew that for a while his life had been in danger, and then hers, and now the danger had passed. That was enough for him. The Wilder had said that no one should hinder him in his path through the water and the wood. After brief discussion, the women decided that this meant he had to traverse the lake from this point to the other end, from the hot to the cold. He had no idea how they discerned that from the holy woman's few words, but then he had often marveled at how many meanings the priest could wrest from the holy writings of the men's religion too. They waited a few minutes until several women called out from the water. Only then did Louette lead him near enough for him to see the lake. Now it was clear where the fog came from. It rose in sheets of steam from the water, or so it appeared to him. Two women in a long, low boat were bringing it to shore, the one rowing, the other at the tiller. The bow of the boat was square and low, but since there were no waves upon the lake, and the rowing was smooth, there seemed no danger of the boat taking water at the bow. They drew closer to shore, until at last they had run aground. Still, there were several meters of water to cross between the boat and the mud flats where Nafai and Louette stood. The mud was painfully hot now, so that Nafai had to move his feet rather often to keep from burning them. What would it be like to walk through the water?
Walk steadily. The less you splash, the better, so you mustn't run. You'll see that if you just keep going, you're in the boat soon, and the pain passes quickly.
So she had done this before. Very well. If Louette could bear it, so could he. He took a step towards the water. The women gasped.
No, in this place, where you're a child and a stranger, you must be led.
Me? A child? Compared to you? But then he realized that of course she was right. Whatever their ages might be, this was her place, not his. She was the adult, and he was the infant here. She set the pace, brisk but not hurried. The water burned his feet, but it was shallow, and he didn't splash very much, though he was not as graceful and smooth in his movements as Louette. In moments, they were at the boat, but it seemed like forever, like 1,000 agonizing steps, especially the hesitation as she stepped into the boat. At last, she was in, and her hand drew him in after her, and he walked on feet that stung so deep within the skin that he was afraid to look down at them for fear the flesh had been cooked off of them. But then he did look, and the skin looked normal. Louette used the hem of her skirt to wipe his feet. The oarsman jammed the blade of the oar into the mud under the water and pushed them back, her muscles of her massive arms rippling with the exertion. Nafai faced Louette and clung to her hands as they glided through the water. It was the strangest journey of Nafai's life, though not a long one. The fog made everything seem magic and unreal. Huge rocks loomed out of the water. They slipped silently between them, and then the stones were swallowed up as if they had ceased to be. The water grew hotter, and there were places where it bubbled. They steered around those spots. The boat itself was never hot, but the air around them was so hot and wet that soon they were drenched, their clothing clinging to their bodies. Nafai could see for the first time that Louette did, in fact, have a womanly shape to her. Not much, but enough that he would never again be able to think of her as nothing but a child. Suddenly, he was shy to be sitting there holding her hands, and yet he was more afraid to let go. He needed to be touching her, like a child holding his mother's hand in the darkness. They drifted on. The air cooled. They passed through narrows with steep cliffs on either hand, seeming to lean closer together the higher they went, until they were lost in the fog. Nafai wondered if perhaps this was a cave, or, if it wasn't, whether the sunlight ever reached the base of this steep rift. Then the cliff walls receded, and the fog thinned just a little. At the same time, the water grew more turbulent. There were waves now, and currents caught the boat and made it want to spin, to yaw from side to side. The oarsman lifted her oars. The steersman took her hand from the tiller. Louette leaned forward and whispered,
This is the place where the visions come. I told you, where the hot and the cold meet. Here is where we pass through the water and the flesh.
In the flesh apparently meant exactly that. Feeling even more shy to watch Louette undressing than to undress himself, he watched his own hands unfasten his clothing and fold it as Louette did hers and lay the pile in the boat, trying to somehow watch her without seeing her. Nafai couldn't quite grasp how she managed to slip so noiselessly into the water, then lie motionless on her back. He could see that she made no move to swim, so when he, noisily, dropped himself into the water, he also lay still. The water was surprisingly buoyant. There was no danger of sinking. The silence was deep and powerful. Only once did he speak, when he could see that she was drifting away from him.
No matter. Hush.
He hushed. Now he was alone in the fog. The currents turned him, or perhaps they didn't, for in the fog he couldn't tell east from west, or anything else having to do with location, except for up and down. And even that seemed to matter very little. It was peaceful here, a place where his eyes could see and yet not see, where his ears could hear and yet hear nothing. The current did not let him sleep, however. He could feel the hot and cold wash under him, sometimes very hot, sometimes very cold, so that sometimes he thought, I can't bear this another moment. I'll have to swim or I might die here. And then the current changed again. He saw no vision. The Oversoul said nothing to him. He listened. He even spoke to the Oversoul, begging to know how he might somehow manage to get the index that Father had sent him for. If the Oversoul heard him, it gave no sign. He drifted on the lake forever, or perhaps it was only a few minutes before he heard the soft touch of the oars in the water. A hand touched his hair, his face, his shoulder, then caught at his arm. He remembered how to turn his head, and then he did. He saw the boat, with Louette now fully dressed, reaching out to him. It did not occur to him to be shy now. He was only glad to see her, and yet sad to think that he had to rise out of the water. He was not deft at climbing into the boat. He rocked it badly and spilled water into it.
Roll in.
He lay on his side in the water, reached a leg and an arm into the boat and rolled in. It was easy, almost silent. Louette handed him his clothing, still wet, but now very cold. He drew it on and shivered as the women propelled the boat on into the bone-chilling fog. Louette shivered, but seemed undisturbed even so. At last they came to a shoreline, where again a group of women were waiting. Perhaps another boat had gone directly across the lake, not waiting for the ritual of passing through the water in the flesh, or perhaps there was some road for runners bearing messages. Whatever the reason, the women waiting for them already knew who they were. There was no need for explanations. Louette again led the way, this time through icy water that made Nafai's bones ache. They reached dry land, a grassy bank this time, instead of mud flats, and women's hands wrapped a dry blanket around him. He saw that Louette also was being warmed. The first man to pass through the water, said a woman. The man who passes through the waters of women, said another. Louette explained to him, seeming a little embarrassed.
Famous prophecies. There are so many of them, it's hard not to fulfill one now and then.
He smiled. He knew that she took the prophecies more seriously than she pretended, and so did he. He noticed that no one asked her what had happened on the water. No one asked whether she had seen a vision, but they lingered, waiting, until finally she said,
"The Oversoul gave me comfort, and it was enough."
They drifted away then, most of them, though a few looked at Nafai until he shook his head.
"We're through the easy part now."
He thought she was joking, but then she led him through the private gate, a legendary gap in the red wall that he had only half believed was real. It was a curving passageway between a pair of massive towers, and instead of city guards, there were only women watching. On the other side, he knew, lay trackless wood. Quickly, he learned that it had earned its name. His face was streaked with cuts, and so was hers, and their arms and legs as well, by the time they emerged onto Forest Road.
"That way is Black Gate, and down any of these canyons you'll reach the desert. I don't know where you're going from there."
That's good enough. I can find my way.
"Then I've done what the Oversoul sent me to do."
Nafai didn't know what to say. He didn't even know the name for what he was feeling.
I think that I don't know you.
She looked at him, a little perplexed.
No, that's wrong. I think that I didn't know you before, even though I thought I knew you, and now that I finally know you, I don't really know you at all.
She smiled.
"Those crossing currents do it to you every time. Tell no one, man or woman, what you did tonight."
I'm not sure, when I remember it, whether I'll believe that it really happened myself.
"Will we see you again at Aunt Ross's house?"
I don't know. I only know this, that I don't know how I can get the index without getting killed, and yet I have to get it.
"Wait until the Oversoul tells you what to do, and then do it."
He nodded.
That's fine if the Oversoul actually tells me something.
"She will. When there's something to do, she'll tell you."
Then, impulsively, Luette reached out her hand and grasped his again just for a moment. He remembered again, like an echo in his flesh, how it felt to cling to her on the lake. He was a little embarrassed now, though, and drew his hand away. She had seen him being weak. She had seen him naked.
"See? You're forgetting already how it really was."
No, I'm not.
She turned away and headed down the road towards Black Gate. He wanted to call out to her and say, "You were right. I was forgetting how it really was. I was remembering it through common, ordinary eyes. I was remembering it as the boy I was before. But now, I remember that it wasn't me being weak, or me being naked, or anything else that I should be ashamed of. It was me riding like a great hero out of prophecy across the magical lake, with you as my guide and teacher. And when we shed our clothing, it wasn't a man and woman naked together. It was rather two gods out of the ancient stories from faraway lands, stripping away their mortal disguises and standing revealed in their glorious immortality, ready to float over the sea of death and emerge unscathed on the other side." But by the time he thought of all the things he wanted to say, she had disappeared around the bend. Once all four Wetchick brothers reunited outside the city walls, Elio was furious with Naif for blowing his trade deal and confirming to Rosh that they were incapable of handling the family finances. And Meb was just as mad. His leisure life in the city was over. How would he spend the family fortune on women and flashy clothing if there was no fortune? So in a fit of rage, they attacked Naif as soon as he returned. The rod fell, knocking Nafai down to the ground. "He's broken my back," thought Nafai. "I'll be paralyzed. I'll be like Isib, crippled in a chair for the rest of my life." It was as if the thought of Isib brought him into action, for as Elmac raised the rod again, Isib's chair swung across in front of him. The chair was turning as it went. It couldn't have been completely under control. And the rod caught Isib across one arm. He screamed in pain, and the chair lost control completely, spinning crazily and reeling back and forth. Its collision avoidance system kept it from banging into the stone walls of the canyon, but it did bump into Mebicu as he tried to run out of the way, knocking him down.
"Stay out of the way, Isib."
You coward. You were nothing before Godbalyafix, and now you can beat a cripple and a 14-year-old boy? Very brave.
Again, Elmac turned away from Isib to face Nafai.
You've said too much this time, boy.
He wasn't shouting this time. It was a colder, deeper anger.
I'm never going to hear that voice again. Do you understand me?
That's right, Elia. You couldn't get Gabalufix to kill Father for you, but at least you can kill me. Go ahead, prove what a man you are by killing your little brother.
Nafai had been hoping to shame Elmac into backing off, but he miscalculated. Instead, Elmac lost all self-control. As Isib spun by in front of him, Elmac seized an outflung arm and dragged Isib from the chair, throwing him to the ground like a broken toy.
No!
Screamed Nafai. He rushed for Isib to help him, but Mebiku was between them, and when Nafai got near enough, Mebiku shoved him into the ground. Nafai sprawled at Elmac's feet. Elmac had dropped his rod. As he reached for it, Mebiku ran to the pack frame and drew out another one.
Let's have done with him now, and if Isib can't keep his mouth shut, both of them.
Whether Elmac heard or not, Nafai couldn't tell. He only knew that the rod came whistling down, smashing into his shoulder. Elmac's aim still wasn't good, but this much was clear. He was striking high on Nafai's body. He was trying for the head. He meant Nafai to die. Suddenly, there was a blinding light in the canyon. Nafai lifted his head in time to see Elmac whirl around, trying to follow the source of the light. It was Isib's chair. Only it couldn't be. Isib's chair had a passive switching system. When it was not being told explicitly what to do, it settled down, leveled itself on its legs, and waited for instructions. It had done just that the moment Elmac dragged Isib to the ground.
What's happening?
What's happening?
Said a mechanical voice from the chair.
You must have broken it.
I am not the one who is broken. Faith and trust are broken. Brotherhood is broken. Honor and law and decency are broken. Compassion is broken, but I am not broken.
Make it stop, Isya.
Nafai noticed that Elmac said nothing. He was eyeing the chair steadily, the rod still in his hands. Then, with a grunt, Elmac rushed forward and swung at the chair with the rod. Lightning flashed, or so it seemed. Elmac screamed and fell back as the rod flew into the air. It was burning the whole length of it. Carefully, slowly, Mebiku slid his own rod back into the pack frame.
Why were you beating your younger brothers with a rod, Elmac? Why did you plan his death, Mebiku?
Who's doing this?
Can't you guess, fool?
Isib spoke feebly from where he lay on the rocks.
Who sent us on this errand in the first place?
Father.
The Oversoul.
Don't you understand yet that because your younger brother Nafai was willing to hear my voice, I have chosen him to lead you?
That silenced them both, but Nafai knew that in their hearts, their hatred of him had passed from hot anger to cold, hard resentment that would never die. The Oversoul had chosen Nafai to lead them. Nafai, who couldn't even get through negotiations with Gabalufix without messing everything up. Oversoul, why are you doing this to me?
If you had not betrayed your father, if you had believed in him and obeyed him, I would not have had to choose Nafai ahead of you. Now go up into Basilica again, and I will deliver Gabalufix into your hands.
With that, the chair's light dimmed, and it settled slowly to the ground. They all waited, dumbly, for a few silent moments. Then Elmac turned to Isib and gently, carefully, lifted him back and put him into his chair.
I'm sorry, Isya. I was not in my right mind. I would never hurt you for the world.
Isib said nothing.
It was Nafai we were angry at.
Isib turned to him and, in a whisper, repeated Meb's own words back to him.
Let's have done with him now, and if Isib can't keep his mouth shut, both of them.
As the four divided brothers returned to the city, Naif tried to learn from Louette. He shut down his mind and let the Oversoul guide him, as she had said she did. They made it into the city without issue, with the help of the Oversoul, who had seemingly made the guards wander off. But suddenly, Naif felt strange. He soon realized the Oversoul wanted him alone to continue on. Naif made his way through the streets until he found a passed-out soldier on the ground in a puddle of vomit, reeking of alcohol and urine. This was the perfect disguise, as every one of Gabia's soldiers recently started wearing a new holographic cloak that they had discovered the plans for in the city library. This made them all look exactly alike. Every soldier had an identical face projected over their own body by it, which prevented any of them from suffering the consequences of their own actions, as no one could tell who was actually under the holographic masks. Naif realized this was the perfect disguise, and with difficulty removed the holographic cloak from the unconscious soldier. But, to Naif's surprise, under the mask was Gabia himself. The Oversoul commanded Naif to take Gabia's blade from his belt and remove Gabia's head. Naif balked at this idea and refused, but the Oversoul insisted that if he did not, thousands, if not millions, would die, and the blood would be on Naif's hands, for he had the opportunity to stop it and did nothing. So, with a lot of convincing from the Oversoul, Naif did the dirty task and beheaded the unconscious Gabia. Naif then donned his clothes and holographic mask. He went back to Gabia's house, and with the help of the Oversoul's telepathy, tricked Gabia's men into thinking it was a drunk Gabia under the hologram. He took command of Gabia's treasurer and ordered him to retrieve the index from the vault. The treasurer led him down to the vaults and pulled out a strange, small golden sphere. Naif now had the index, but he was in the heart of Gabia's forces, so he made the treasurer walk with him, since the treasurer wore no holographic cloak, to ease the way for his passage. But by the time the two were free of the men and Gabia's compound, Naif was too scared to let the treasurer go. He had been around Naif too long. He may have started to pick up on the fact that it was not Gabia beneath the cloak. So he kept the treasurer with him so he could not go back and warn the soldiers. He led him back to where his three brothers waited, and together they detained the treasurer. Now that they had obtained the index, they traveled back to their camp outside the city, where their camels waited to take them back to Father. Here, they gave the treasurer the option of dying or swearing allegiance to the brothers and their family. Of course he swore his allegiance, but Meb and Elia did not trust him. Of course he would say yes to save his own life. So Naif asked the Oversoul for guidance, and it told him to trust the man. Elia took the index from the treasurer, just a small golden sphere, but when he handed it to Naif, it suddenly came to life, showing a holographic arrow floating above itself. Naif handed it back to Elia, as Elia knew the paths outside the city the best, so he should lead. But the moment it was handed back to Elia, it again went dark. Naif could tell that Elia hated him all the more for the fact the Oversoul had clearly chosen him, the younger brother. They traveled and brought the index back to Father and their camp in the desert. Here, Isib, Father, and Naif all touched the index at once, and the Oversoul spoke to them.
"Awake after all this time,"
said the index. It was a whisper. Nafai wasn't altogether sure whether he was hearing it with his ears or whether his mind was transforming the ambient noises, the desert breeze, their own breathing, into a voice.
"You came to us at great cost."
"I waited a long time to have this voice again."
It wasn't the index speaking. Nafai knew that now. This is the voice of the Oversoul.
"Yes."
"If this contains your voice, why is it called an index?"
The answer came only after a long hesitation.
"This is the index to me."
The index of the Oversoul. An index was a tool created to make it easier for people to find their way through the labyrinthine memories of a complex computer. The Oversoul was the greatest of all computers, and this was the tool that would let Nafai and Isib and Father begin at last to understand it.
Now that we have the index, can you explain to us what you are?
Again, the pause, and then the whispering.
"I am the memory of Earth. I was never meant to last so long. I am wakening, and must return to the one who is wiser than I, who will tell me what to do to save this unharmonious world called harmony. I have chosen your family to carry me back to the Keeper of Earth.
That is where you're leading us?
The world that was buried in ice and hidden in smoke is surely alive and awake now. The Keeper who drove humankind from the planet they destroyed will surely not turn his face away from you now. Follow me, children of Earth, and I will take you back to your ancient home.
Nafai looked from father to Isib and back again.
Do you realize what this means?
A long journey.
Long. So long that it takes light 100 years to reach us.
What are you talking about? You'd think the Oversoul had promised to take us to another planet.
Isib's words hung in the air like music out of tune. Nafai sat there stunned. Of course, Oversoul had promised to take them to another planet. Those were its plain words. Except this wasn't what Isib had heard, or father. Obviously then, the index did not make literal sounds, and they were in fact hearing with their minds, not their ears.
What did you think the Oversoul said?
That he was going to lead us to a beautiful land, a good place where crops would grow and orchards thrive, a place where our children would be good and free, without the evils of Basilica.
But where? Where did it say that this beautiful land would be?
Nafai, you must learn to be more patient and trusting. The Oversoul will lead us one step at a time, and then, one day, one of those steps will be the last one in our journey, and we'll be home.
It won't be a city, but it will be a place where I can use my floats again.
Nafai was deeply disappointed. He knew what he had heard, but he also knew that father and Isib had not heard it. Why not? Either it meant that they simply could not comprehend the voice of the Oversoul as clearly as he could, or it meant that the Oversoul had given them a different message. Either way, he couldn't force his own understanding on them.
What did you hear? Was there more?
Nothing important for now. What really matters is knowing that we're not going to wait around for Basilica to take us back. We're not exiles anymore. We're expatriates, emigrants. Basilica is not our city anymore.
Father sighed.
And to think I was just about to retire and turn the business over to Elia. I didn't want to journey anymore. I'm about to take the longest journey of my life, I fear.
Nafai reached out and took the index between his hands and drew it close. It trembled in his grasp.
As for you, my strange little index, I hope you turn out to be worth all the trouble that was taken to get you. The price that was paid.
Such a fortune. I never knew we were so rich until the day we weren't.
We are richer than ever now. We have a whole land promised to us, with no city or clan or enemy to take it away. And the index to the Oversoul is here to lead the way.
Nafai hardly heard them. He was thinking of the blood that he had shed, of how it stained his clothing and his skin. I didn't want to do it, he thought, and it was simple justice to take the life of a murderer. When Elmac thought he might have killed a man from far off with a pulse, he bragged about it, but I killed him close, under my own hand, as he lay drunken and helpless on the street. I did it, not in fear for my own life, and not to protect a caravan, but in cold blood, without anger, because the Oversoul had told me that it was right, and because I believed in my own heart that it was necessary. But I also hated him. Will I ever be sure that I didn't do it because of that hatred, that longing for vengeance? I fear that I will always suspect that I am an assassin in my heart. I can live with that, though. I can sleep tonight. With time, I'm sure that the pain of it will even fade. It's the price of the thing that I agreed to be, a servant of the Oversoul. I'm not my own man anymore. I'm a man the Oversoul has chosen to make of me. I hope I like, at least, a small part of what I've become, when at last the Oversoul is through with me. He slept that night and dreamed, not of murder, not of Gabaliafix's head, nor of the blood on his own clothes. Instead, he dreamed of drifting on a sea whose currents ran hot and cold, as fog drifted endlessly in front of his face. And then, out of this lost and mysterious and peaceful place, hands searched across his face, his shoulders, and then took hold of his arm and pulled him close. I'm not the first one here, he realized as he woke from the dream. I'm not alone in this place, this kingdom of the Oversoul. Others have been here before me, and are with me now, and will be with me through all that is to come. And that's the end of the first book in the saga, The Memory of Earth. My next video will be the second of the 3 books, The Call of Earth. If you can't tell, they were never meant to be standalone books as many other sequels are, so I will be doing all 3 books in a row. So, subscribe for that if you want to hear the rest of the story. Hey, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you staying this long, and since you did, hopefully that means you like my channel. So I'd really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe, so I can see you back here for the next one. Take care.